Well, welcome to a game day edition of Waking the Red Weekly presented by Footy Talks to kick off what could be another banner week of soccer in this country. Tonight, MLS is back in Canada with a series of inter-Canadian matchups stretching into September. The Canadian Premier League Island games are off and running in Prince Edward Island, and Canadian players continue to make headlines in top European competitions. My name is Mitchell Tierney, and we're glad you could all join us today, whether that be in the live Zoom audience, on Facebook, or wherever you're watching or listening to the show today. Aron Papernick, host of Canada FC, is our guest this week, and we'll join the show shortly. But first, my co-hosts, Michael Singh, Jeff Nesker. Looks like it's a V-neck week this week on Waking the Red Weekly.
Excuse me. This is a crossover caller.
Yes,
yeah,
right.
Exactly.
No, I went straight V-neck. It's game day, man. I'm pumped. I can't wait.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, last week we were literally talking about all this in the hypothetical, right? We were like, what's going to happen with MLS is back and with the Canadian teams, and then a week later we're sitting here and preparing for a game. So things move very quickly in the current landscape. But as part of the show this week, we do have a poll question that we wanted to lead with off the top.
Technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Very exciting stuff. The question for this week is who gives Toronto FC more trouble in this inter-Canadian matchup? Is that the Montreal Impact or the Vancouver Whitecaps? Quickly before we get Aron on, guys, I guess we'll start with you, Michael. Who's your troublemaker for Toronto FC?
Troublemaker for Toronto FC is Vancouver Whitecaps for me. At MLS is back. We saw kind of what the team can do without a lot of their players. But now you insert the likes of, let's say, just a Lucas Cavallini, for example, who Vanney talked about a lot leading up to the game, on top of what they already showed at MLS's back. And, this is a side that can cause troubles for Toronto FC, I think. And TFC shouldn't be comfortable getting into this match.
I'm going to take the opposite perspective and pick Montreal. I mean, for reasons that we all know by heart. One, it's Montreal, and the games are always chaos. But Thierry Henry's got a lot to prove, and there's been a lot of shakeups internationally in terms of coaches losing their jobs, and his name's been bandied about. I don't know how realistic that is, considering his coaching experience is now two teams with not a lot of tactical news to them, but his name's bandied about regardless. So he's in the shop window for better or worse, and he's got something to prove. And Montreal always has something to prove. So I'm going to go with Montreal. It sucks that I wasn't able to vote in that pool, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, I was literally just about to say that. It said hosts can't vote in the poll, but if I did have a vote, I think I'm with Michael on this. I think the Vancouver Whitecaps, from what I've seen over the MLS's back tournament and what we saw before, I mean, this is a team where we didn't even see all of their pieces. They were still able to at least be very difficult to play against at the MLS's back tournament. So I think they come here with maybe the most to prove of all these clubs, considering, what they've been dragged through as an organization, or what they've dragged themselves through as an organization over, the past year or so. I guess quickly we should probably explain the format and what's happening over the next little bit, before, as we just kind of dived into it there. But if you haven't heard, the MLS returns to Canada plans. All Canadian MLS teams will play each other 3 times over the next few weeks. They'll stretch into early September. And the big, I guess, carrot at the end of the stick is that the top Canadian team from that inter-Canadian tournament will, of course, advance straight to the Voyageurs Cup final. They'll play against the winner of the Canadian Premier League Island games. So right there, that's your Voyageurs Cup for this year. Jeff, let's get your thoughts on that, the format.
I have given up trying to understand 2020. I'm happy that there's soccer. Twitter's going to be fun. When is it not fun? I still can't believe that app is free. But I don't know. There are bigger brains than I trying to deduce what the hell is happening with CONCACAF League versus CONCACAF Champions League berths. And no answers have been satisfactory. I know Dave Clanahan came on during his announcement, and he said that his league was basically getting all the spots, which doesn't make any sense to me. But yeah, I mean, I'll end how I opened. I don't have a clue. I just know that a ball's going to get kicked somewhere and that a team is going to win something.
Yeah, no, 2020, I'm just happy to see soccer again. So the fact that we're we're gonna have a decision on the Canadian Championship, I mean, is it the most ideal decision? No, obviously not. We'd rather it be how it usually is, but I mean, I'm happy to see soccer again. I
Yeah,
guess just leave it at that. It works. It works. We're gonna have a Canadian Championship decided.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think for me, under the circumstances, I think it makes a lot of sense. And it would have been just so tough with the crazy MLS schedule. I'm trying to piece together a season, what KMPL is doing for them to have any sort of extended tournament. I think even if it was, 1 week in a bubble somewhere, I think just collaborating all of that would have been too difficult. So
Hmm, hmm.
at this point, I think this makes the most sense. And the one thing I do kind of like about it is, it kind of elevates Canadian Premier League to really looking like the D1 league, right? When the formats of past years, it always emphasized the MLS teams. And, I don't know if that's necessarily what they should be doing because, again, both of these are D1 leagues. We know the Canadian Premier League's new and it doesn't, the teams aren't necessarily as talented, but they did play the MLS teams very close. In fact, of course, Calgary famously beating Vancouver.
Hmm.
Cavalry. I don't want to
Yeah,
get
yeah,
my
yeah.
Carson on
Yes.
there. Sorry about that, everybody. Of course, famously beating the Vancouver Whitecaps. So that's the one wrinkle I really liked about it was the fact that it does put the Canadian Premier League on the exact same footing as the MLS leader from Canada.
Hmm, hmm. I mean, I'm still getting over our capitulation to not getting that CONCACAF spot in MLS's back tournament, and I have a really bad feeling that this is going to be Forge versus TFC in the final. So that's my bone was with it.
Yeah, that would definitely be quite interesting, especially for for so many of the people who are both Forge and Toronto FC fans, which I think there is a fair amount. Um, we'll have Aron on in just a moment here, it looks like, but just going into today's game, of course, it is a game day. We talked a little bit about the Vancouver Whitecaps. What do you expect from Toronto FC over this next little stretch? Because again, they are quick and fast games. You're playing two in the space of 1 week, not a long gap between the two games. Do you think we see more rotation than we saw down in Orlando? Same kind of trying to get a main 11 working together. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I think we do see, or at least to start, we're gonna see Jozy back up top. So that's a positive, I guess you can look at it that way. But we will try or we're hoping that Vanney is going to try and have some sort of continuity at this tournament. We learned that squad rotation is key, but Vanney did factor the weather into all of that. He did say now that it's more ideal conditions, 23-degree weather, that we're actually going to see a better version of Toronto FC this time around. And one of the things that he specifically talked about was Toronto FC's ability to press. He said that in the Florida heat, TFC kind of ran out of energy, kind of ran out of their legs, kind of in maybe the 65th, 70th minute. And here, under 23-degree conditions, he doesn't expect that to be an issue. So he's expecting both sides, put forth a quality product. And I think the goal is always to come away 3 points. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious to see what happens. I mean, it's been how many weeks? How many Sundays has it been? 2, 3? I don't. What's a Sunday? But yeah. I mean, I'd be happy with a performance akin to the opening match of the Disney tournament versus DC United without the capitulation at the end. So that's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it looks like our guest is now here. We're now joined by Aron Papernick, host of Canada FC on Sirius XM 167. Aron, love the Argentina strip. The background too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Thank you.
Shame.
The Argentina trip in honor of our boy Messi. He's going through some tough times right now. Who knows what's going to happen in the near future? The background courtesy of my wife's wallpaper company, Fine and Dandy Company. Plugs.
Cross promotion. Love it.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, poor Messi. I mean, we don't have to dwell too much on that,
No,
but
no.
certainly one of the results heard around the world, and we'll be talking about that for years to come. But I did want to get your thoughts right off the top. We were talking about it on the Voyageurs Cup format and the MLS returns format, and all of the things that just kind of got news dumped on. I think it was Wednesday last week.
Yeah, the Voyageurs Cup format, I mean, nothing is going to be perfect. Everything is, there's going to be compromises one way or another. One loss is the bracket system, obviously, like last year, as you were talking about, some great battles, York 9 versus Montreal Impact, Cavalry versus Whitecaps, Cavalry moving on to face Impact. Great battles there, but of course the final last year ended up being MLS versus MLS, Toronto versus Montreal. So the compromise is you lose battles along the way, since it's only like a one match, it's a finalist versus finalist, but we gain the confirmation that it'll be a CPL versus MLS team, and not that like we saw last year where it was in early rounds and then it just went away. So yeah, whether it is Forge versus TFC, whether it's whoever versus whoever, I'm looking forward to that aspect of it, that we're guaranteed a CPL versus MLS team. And look, not only are there Canadians on obviously all over Canadian Premier League rosters fighting for respect and survival, but there's tons of Canadians who are from MLS farm systems, WFC2, TFC2, FC Montreal when it existed. Who knows which of those players are going to reach that final and have that extra chip on their shoulder, not just the glory, not just CPL versus MLS, but possibly sticking it to their former organization.
Yeah, Aaron, what I want to know, what's the gap between a CPL team and an MLS team? Is that final going to be very one-sided, and is it really going to live up to the expectations of a final?
In terms of, I don't know if you can make a blanket statement about the gap. As we saw last year, some CPL teams hung in with MLS teams very well, and as we said, Cavalry managed to best an MLS team. So I don't know if we can make a blanket statement. I wonder how much fitness and regularity of play is going to play into things also. CPL on the island, playing the island games, a bunch of games in a short period of time after a long layoff, that will probably benefit those players. The three Canadian teams in the MLS that played in the MLS's back tournament in Orlando, they're now coming on a month off. A month. Now, I know they've had training. I know there's been training protocols with COVID-19 preparations for all three Canadian MLS clubs, but it's been a month without action. And I think that once they get the ball rolling, no pun intended, and the three Canadian MLS clubs play each other, they're playing fairly fast and furious, yes, but I feel like the CPL teams may have a better runway of consistent action leading up to that final Canadian Championship date.
Yeah, the Toronto FC players, of course, all of them had to quarantine as well for 14 days. So that's not really ideal in what would be kind of the middle of the season either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to talk about beer right now. We're going to talk about soccer. But do you think this year we're going to see a phase 2-ish where the Canadian MLS teams go and play in market in the United States? If you had to look in your crystal ball.
I feel like the league would want to make that happen, but I feel like the three Canadian teams would not want to make that happen. And we know that Toronto FC is a big club in the league. They throw their weight around and their money around and their wallets around, and a bigger club, if you want to use that metric, than Montreal or Vancouver. But Toronto FC threw their weight around on the date they went down to Orlando, what date to play, things like that. But they do have marquee players and marquee stars, and the U.S. national team stars, and Jozy Altidore and Michael Bradley. And you have Americans who want to see Thierry Henry, even though he's on the sidelines with Montreal and not in a kit. So I feel like the league is going to want to make it happen, but I feel like the teams are going to band together to not make it happen. I don't know who has the power in that relationship and who will have the ultimate say. That's why I feel like we're coming to a bit of a stalemate on that respect.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I agree. I absolutely agree with you. This seems like a stopgap measure. It's going to cross a few things off a checklist, but come a month or so down the road, we're still going to be at another impasse. And it's very much a wait and see approach. Knock on wood that the pandemic situation is sort of abated a little bit, so that it's even something that's worth discussing. But yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that sentiment.
Yeah, Aaron, could you sort of catch us up on the other two Canadian teams and kind of what their mentality is coming into this sort of Canadian championship?
It's interesting for both sides. I'm sure we're going to talk more about Vancouver in a little while over the course of the show. Vancouver Whitecaps, a bit of a dark horse coming into this mini Canadian MLS's tournament because, as you remember, they did reach the first knockout match in MLS's back in Orlando, but they did not have 3 strikers. They did not bring Tosin Ricketts, Freddie Montero, and Lucas Cavallini, of course, Canadian international, down to Orlando. So they managed to make it there without 3 high-powered strikers. They did use their backup goalkeeper, Thomas Hassal, who acquitted himself very well. I expect to see him in goal. So once they have the emotional boost of making it to the knockout round and then coming back to Vancouver and integrating those offensive players, I think that they could be a real dark horse here. Again, a month off from action, rest versus rust. Does that help the team and help them rest up and heal those little annoying injuries, or does that make them rusty and complacent? Montreal Impact are an odd bird this year. They've been, I call them the still rebuilding Montreal Impact, and it's August. If you remember that the league started in March and Montreal started in February in CCL. They're still alive in CCL, by the way, if and when that resumes. They are down on aggregate, but they're still alive if we do see a CCL in 2020. So they played CCL matches, MLS matches, and then 4 matches in MLS is back. And there's still so much tinkering going on down in Orlando. I still don't quite know what kind of team and how Thierry Henry is going to put them together. We know what kind of player he was as a player, obviously, but I don't think they have the firepower to be an all-out creative Thierry Henry type offensive team. And that's when I wonder, again, a month off, and almost every match down in Orlando had a different lineup from Thierry Henry. So after a month, has he settled on his lineup, or is he going to tinker 2 games a week for the next few weeks coming up from Montreal? Or are we going to see a different team every match again? That's why they're kind of a dark horse. I know the emotions are there when they meet up with Toronto in these upcoming games, and then the emotion will be there anyways for when they play Vancouver, because these matches matter for the standings. They matter for who's going to reach the Canadian Championship. We are familiar with a lot of the pieces on Montreal, but I still don't know how they fit together completely as a team this year.
Absolutely. To switch it up, just going back to, when do you think they're going to invite fans back to our church on the lakeshore?
I'm of 2 minds of this. On one hand, I've seen what happened in the U.S. down at Dallas, did not look good. But on the other hand, in Ontario, I don't know if this is a valid comparison or not. We have movie theaters open. So movie theaters are open. They're operating. Those are big open spaces. They're not open air like a stadium. They're enclosed, but the auditoriums are very big. And you have to buy your ticket in advance, and only 2 people maximum could sit together, and there's a gap of about 5-10 seats between each 2-person grouping. So part of me thinks, if that can work at a movie theater, why couldn't it work at a sports stadium with 20,000 and change seats, 25,000, 30,000? No movie theater has that amount of seats. Stadiums are open air, and we're being told every day that being outdoors, unenclosed, is better than being enclosed. If movie theaters can do it, why can't a stadium do it? I do know, of course, especially at Toronto FC's BMO Field, the stadium I know the best, there's certain hallways and concourses where it can be hard to distance people from each other. Maybe if people are told you can only enter a certain gate and there are staff there trying to distance people, maybe that can work. But again, I don't think many people are going to the movie theaters, but they are legally open and operating. So if that can happen, why couldn't a sports stadium happen?
So would you go?
I would go. I would go. Even I think it's going to be odd. It's been eerie. I know sometimes going into certain restaurants or establishments with your mask, it kind of feels normal on one hand, but also kind of eerie on the other hand. I think it would be an interesting experience, interesting footnote as a fan. I was at the CCL game at BMO Field about 2010 or 11. They got rained out by a hurricane, and then was rescheduled the next morning for 10 a.m. I think only about 2,000 or 3,000 people came because it was in the middle of the workday. That's a story. That's a story for the people who went. So based on one's own comfort with the regulations they choose to put into place, I would go. I would do it.
How about you, Mitch? Mike, would you go?
I'm just remembering a time when 10 a.m. games were weird.
I would be there for sure. I'm gonna be fortunate enough to be in the press box tonight.
Nice.
Yeah, very, very limited, but I'm just excited to return to BMO Field. I would do anything to be there, and I during the summer, during this lockdown, I've taken walks to BMO Field just to get that vibe back. So I love it there, and I'd be there in a heartbeat.
I think
Jeff
I would
is
go
unbelievably jealous right now.
Who's next on the questions?
Yeah, I guess I have two questions here, but we haven't talked really too much about the Canadian Premier League Island games so far. What have been your thoughts of, the level of competition and I guess the product the league's put on so far?
I'll go first, I guess.
Oh yeah.
Compromises. It's not perfect, and again, rust I think was evident in a lot of the players in the first maybe game or two. Some of the teams have played two games, but pretty impressive. I'm impressed with the video display of the games, the way the games are put together. And again, it's a year of compromises. Nothing's going to look the same way it was. Nothing's going to be the same way it was. Players, leagues around the world have told us they feed off the cheers and boos, so it's not the same when the stadium's empty. Yes, their teammates are cheering them. It's not the same. Some players thrive upon being booed by 20,000 fans, but depending on the player, I mean, it's also so. I feel the Canadian Premier League is doing the right thing, doing the best thing. This is their second year of existence. It could have almost derailed the whole operation before it almost got off the ground. So to put this tournament together, to have the teams buy in, to have fans watching, nationwide fans watching on One Soccer. I've been seeing a little bit of buzz from curious Americans on Twitter tuning in on One Soccer. Good on the league, good on them. And the players that are coming back for their second year, they know what it's all about. There's been some rivalries there. There's been bonding there. So I think it's been as great as it can be given the circumstances.
Yeah, I haven't confirmed it, but I don't think they're watching it in the States on One Soccer. I think it actually got FS1, so down on the cable dial. It was a piggyback of the One Soccer broadcast. They're obviously not going to rebroadcast the thing, but I do think it aired on FS1, which points to future collaborations between Canadian broadcast over-the-top services and American terrestrial networks, which can only be a good thing.
I think in general, it's been a great thing for the Canadian Premier League. You talk about the Canadian Championship again, seeing a Canadian Premier League in the final, and now we talk about potentially having some viewership on FS1, them being able to put together a season ultimately in Canada after what we saw with the CFL. It's been nothing but great for Canadian soccer, I guess, and I think that's just my biggest takeaway from this all is that they kept going and they put together something that didn't, detract them after their first positive year. That it's still kind of going uphill, so it's a positive for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they would have been auctioning off their validity had they canceled the second year outright. So I'm pretty happy that they got something together. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Unless there's any audience questions, I don't know if you wouldn't mind checking quickly for those, Jeff. Before I let you go, Aaron, I wanted to, I guess, ask you, I mentioned it off the top. It really seems like it's a time right now where there's so much momentum for Canadian soccer. We've got the Canadian Premier League coming back. There's this MLS inter-team tournament, of course, and we've got Alphonso Davies and Jonathan David making all kinds of headlines over in Europe, and other guys going over there as well. What are kind of the keys to keeping up that momentum right now and making sure that this continues to build towards something really tangible in the worldwide soccer?
I think again with this with COVID-19 interrupting everything in life, we're going to see the dividends in Canadian men's national team World Cup qualifying, Nations League when and however that resumes, and then the Olympic level U23s, U21s, whenever and however that resumes. That's not been mentioned a lot considering all the soccer going on around us and clubs and league soccer is back, but that's where I think we'll see the dividends, and we can only wait and see how they're going to be rescheduled and in what formats. We know there's been a format change for World Cup qualifying, which hopefully will benefit Canada. That's where I think we'll see it really is see again, I'm hoping to see more Canadian Premier League players on the men's national team, even if they are just on the bench. I'm hoping to see so much youth in the Canadian Premier League, hoping to see them show up for Olympic qualifying or U20 CONCACAF tournaments, U21 World Cups, whatever. That's what I want to see resume in addition to everything else. And that's where I think we're going to see what is the real development of Canadian soccer.
Do you think that J. Dave and Fonzie opened the floodgates a little bit? I mean, I remember reading on Twitter that Barcelona was offered Fonzie, and I can't remember the outgoing president's name, but he said, "Nah, Canadian." And there have been a few articles since then. J. Sam Jones did one on the MLS Mothership where he was talking about a sea change, where players in a development pipeline in the MLS. He was specific to MLS, but I would open it up to North America and perhaps even the CPL, that we're going to get more eyeballs now. And I don't necessarily even think that's a consequence of COVID. I think that may be a consequence of Fonzie and Jonathan David making all these headways.
I think so. I think that some of the top Canadian talent maybe put on the Maple Leaf for the men's national team. You think of a Scotty Arfield, who was a dual national who signed with Canada. You even think of Lucas Cavallini, I believe, did he take some time to put on the Maple Leaf and was kind of on the fence for a while, if I recall. I may be incorrect there.
No, you
don't say Owen Hargraves though, because
I was not going to say that name, leaving that out for now. So the change from those type of players to homegrown players who developed in Canada and developed in MLS. Of course, Jonathan David did not, but Fonzie did. And hopefully we'll see greater things for Tristan Borges and Emilio Estevez in Europe, also developed through CPL as well. I think that is a bit of a change. And I hope that that's in the right circumstances, Canadian players become part of a selling league system, part of being sold from MLS or CPL.
Do you see that as the natural progression of MLS from a buying league to a selling league?
I don't, because it's still, in a sense, I don't want to get in trouble, America's league for America's fans in a large sense.
Right.
And so it's America's league for America's fans and for America's best players in a sense. Lots of asterisks there. If you want to attack me on Twitter, go for it. I can take it. I see maybe the CPL as being Canada's league for Canadian development, but also a valid pipeline for being look, selling leagues is not a slander on the Belgian league, not a slander on the Dutch league, not a slander on the Portuguese league. Development leagues can be a feather in the cap. This is the team that developed so-and-so. This is a league that groomed so-and-so. I think that should be a byproduct, 2 tracks for CPL, Canadian men's national team talent, and selling league.
So I'm fascinated by this. So would you say that MLS is operating on 2 different principles right now? One trying to be a development league and the other one trying to be the league of choice? Or would you say that they're kind of all on board with that schematic of the Sellers League now?
I mean, of course we watch MLS. We're talking about Canadian MLS clubs, but I still feel at times, and I hope I don't get in the hot water, I still feel like we're Canadian passengers on an American train. And
absolutely. And the domestic rule for players, it's completely, it's ridiculous at this point. But,
to say the least. And then the fanfare when an American player comes back, like Clint Dempsey coming back, or Alejandro Bedoya coming back, or players coming back. It's huge for them. But, the league does, when Fonzie does something good in Germany, from the league social media accounts, they do keep bringing up his Whitecaps clips. So it's kind of both. It's kind of neither and both.
Yeah. I mean, there's we live in a 24-hour news cycle, so they're still talking about Zlatan on the MLS mothership. Anybody that drove by the MLS head offices and had a coffee is going to get a mention. And I don't necessarily knock them for that, because the need for content is so pervasive. You just have to be a bit proactive about it. Like I can definitely see where people would raise issue with it, but to me, my margins are a bit higher in that regard. I know we talked about this last week, and Mitch has it on the rundown for today, but I think we should open it up now. The news of the academy possibly losing Pellegrino and Perusa, and last week we were discussing Toronto's difficulty with playing the kids, and Mitch alluded to it being kind of an MLS problem. With a hard salary cap, et cetera, et cetera. But I was thinking about that all week, and even in the big leagues in Europe, there are tons of examples of people coming up through the youth system or the academy system and fizzling out. I mean, Mo Salah at Chelsea comes to mind. So do you think that this is like the Achilles heel of MLS, the sort of disconnect between academies and the first team? And we can be specific to TFC. I'm sure we're going to get into that later.
Looking at it from TFC's perspective, I think it's the Achilles heel of being a big club with deep pockets, deep-pocketed owners, that there are times where you never have to pinch your pennies, and so you never have to not sign a player and play a kid. You don't have to. You can sign, I know it's a cap league, I get it. You can sign whatever player you want for whatever deal you want, for whatever TAM or GAM you want. You can do whatever. You're a big dog in this league with big wallets. And I think that may take away chances from youngsters to play. And I look at quotes from young Ija Halley, who was part of the Toronto FC system, who joined York 9 in the Canadian Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
He said very politely, and I'll paraphrase him, he said he felt like he reached a ceiling there. Maybe he was stagnating, and he thanked them for the soccer training and life training they gave him, but he felt like he might not be able to go anywhere despite being a GTA kid on the hometown club, might not have felt there was a pathway for him to the first team. So, and he said this to the media, this was on the CPL website. And so now he's part of York 9 in the CPL, where also the pro youth minutes ruling is going to give him more chance to play. I think that it's Toronto's problem. And again, I wonder if we're going to see a change in the future once this current team, this core, ages out. Maybe we'll see a bit of a change wholesale in the offseason. Maybe we'll see a bit piece in, piece out, a piece in, piece out. That's why I wonder if that's coming down the road from Ali Curtis, because I know he was a fairly pro-youth GM with the Red Bull.
MO, yeah.
But he has mentioned to the media recently that he's kind of standing pat for right now. So, but if he's pro-youth, I wonder if it's a thorn in his side to see, these players leaving, players joining CPL, players joining other leagues. Who knows? But I just wonder if that's one of Toronto's problems. They can throw money at a problem whenever they want to. Vancouver and Montreal, possibly not so much.
Well, I mean, look, Barcelona, like they might end up paying Liverpool 5 million euros because their loan player is going to beat them in the Champions League. I like personally, when Mark Anthony Kaye was doing the rounds and he had a personal accountability, he was willing to own up to the fact that maybe he wasn't ready to be a first team player before TFC released them. And I'm seeing a lot of the former TFC players that have kind of moved to the CPL, like Ryan Telfer was a little bit lippy to TFC in an interview that I saw at One Soccer. Rob Gale, when what was he talking? He was talking about Julian Dunn, and he said this guy deserves MLS minutes. I mean, it's all wonderful quotes and good copy. But I just don't know if it's necessarily always TFC's fault, I guess.
Yeah, Mike, I want to get your thoughts on this as well in a second, but I think largely this probably is a positive thing for Toronto FC. We're seeing, and Canadian soccer as well, that we're seeing such a collective group of youth players that get brought up in a very good system at, a top of the line academy. And then there really are only 11 spots on the field. So as much as, we want to see all of these guys succeed and make it with Toronto FC, it's not always going to happen. So seeing a guy from your academy go off to a Bundesliga club, that's a positive in terms of what you're doing development-wise, I think. And we weren't seeing that, we weren't seeing that in prior years. And I do think, the Ali Curtis thing is interesting because I do think there might be a bit of a disconnect between the players that Greg Vanney likes to play and, the kind of the youth movement that Ali Curtis wants to institute with Toronto FC. I know Vanney tends to lean towards veterans. It's not, it's not always the case. We've seen him put some young guys in, but he tends to lead towards veterans, whereas Curtis has that track record of wanting to play the older players. But that'll be something that'll be interesting going forward, because I think if you keep, doing what Aaron said, keep bringing in, just opening the checkbook, I think you every once in a while hit a season like 2018 where, you just sign the wrong guys and all of a sudden you just can't get it together and things fall apart like that. So I think, integrating the young guys as well has to be seen as a priority for this team. Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I have quite a bit. Well, first of all, yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you, Mitch. We're at a golden age almost where Toronto FC prospects are coming left, right, and center. We saw TFC make an abundance of homegrown signings this offseason. I think they had the most homegrown signings in the league, if I'm not mistaken, right? So losing a player like Pellegrino, it's going to hurt. But knowing they have the likes of Jaquil Marshall-Ruti, Jaden Nelson, and, just Rocco Romeo rounding out the third homegrown player signing this summer, or this January, it's a great thing for Toronto FC. It's a great problem for Toronto FC to have. You're inevitably, like Mitch said, you only have 11 spots on the field. You're inevitably going to lose players. You're not going to be able to keep every player, and obviously losing a player like Pellegrino does hurt. It does sting, but at the same time, you're also are getting yourself kind of on the map. That kid came from Toronto FC, as sort of Aaron pointed out, alluded to earlier in the show. Is these kids are coming through the academy, and I think they are destined. Canadian kids are destined for greater things in MLS. So it's a positive, yeah.
Yeah, definitely a discussion that will continue much of this season. I think this season might be a bit of a boiling point for the young guys versus veterans debate, as it has been so far.
We got that poll, remember? We got poll number 2, which segues perfectly from what you just said.
What is poll question number 2? I don't know. There we go.
Yeah.
Will Michael Bradley play 90 minutes in
Technology
both games this week? So yeah, there you go. That's an interesting question that certainly we've asked almost every week on this show.
Yeah, and
so far.
I can't vote on it. So
yeah, we are the Michael Bradley minutes tracker podcast at this point. But Aaron, I really appreciate you coming on this week. Yeah, it's been freaking great having you on.
All right. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's been great.
Awesome to
Thanks,
see you.
Aaron.
Absolutely,
Cheers,
yeah,
buddy.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again to Aron Papernick, host of Canada FC on Sirius XM 167. Before we wrap up, guys, I just quickly wanted to talk about, of course, our boy. He feels like our son almost at this point, at least Canada's son, Alphonso Davies.
Fonzie.
Just going off in the Champions League quarterfinals.
Before we should give some lip service to the technology pool, and it looks like 100% of responders said that Michael Bradley's going to play all 90 minutes for both games. So
surprise.
I think that's a safe bet, to be honest. But yeah, Alphonso Davies, obviously, I mean, it was an 8-2 game, it's not like Alphonso Davies was a make or break player in that game, but I mean, that's a moment that, I certainly didn't expect. I knew we could potentially see that from Alphonso Davies when he left the Vancouver Whitecaps, but I don't think anyone expected to see something like that happen so soon, did they, Michael?
Man, I can't believe we're actually watching a player play for Bayern Munich against Barcelona, and he's Canadian and he's excelling and he's being the difference maker in this game. If you were to told me that 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have told you were crazy, because there was no one that was really like Fonzie was on the radar and he was supposed to be great, but was he ever supposed to be this good this quickly? Like, come on. And what he's doing for Canada's soccer, it gets me so excited just thinking about the next generation of Canadian soccer players that are going to come through, knowing that they have him to look up to.
Yeah, I've watched that replay about 17 billion times at this point.
Yeah.
and I still love every damn second of it. I mean, I've seen the BT Sport commentary, sensational. I've seen it in French, I've seen it in German, wow. Just wow. I mean, I was jumping up and down. I hope no one was walking by my apartment because they thought I might have been having a stroke, because I lost my mind. And he willed that goal into existence. That was phenomenal. Like, just left Messi and Vidal in his dust, like clown Semedo. And then, of course, Piqué falling over at the end. Like, he just, I've seen Messi do that to other teams. That's the fun part. Like, I've been at Camp Nou and I've seen Messi do that to Getafe. I did not expect Fonzie to do that to Barcelona so quickly. Like, it's pretty ridiculous. That is a heritage moment for sure. I mean, that's something that will be in the highlight reel of CanSoc from this point onward, without question.
Yeah, and the goal was just icing on the cake, and I feel like it was so fitting because just with everything that Fonzie's done, everything building up to this kind of moment, and talking about before the game how Messi was his hero or one of his heroes growing up, his childhood. This is the guy he watched. It was poetic, was it not? It couldn't have really come up with a kind of a better, I guess. Yeah, again, icing on the cake there.
Sorry.
Yeah,
go. He got the yellow, right? And then he got the knock in the head. And then maybe a minute later he did that run. Was that the correct order of things, or am I flipping it? Did he get?
I think the knock was after the
After the
goal,
yellow.
'cause, yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's why he was taken off, I think. But yeah, I was just gonna say, on top of the goal, what I was really impressed with was just his overall performance in that match. Again, we didn't really see too much of Messi Fonzie 1v1 as we were hyping up down that right wing, because Messi sort of dropped off, and maybe it's because he was scared to run at Fonzie with Fonzie's legs. He couldn't maybe get him behind Fonzie, so he decided to sort of play in front of him. And he creates a legitimate threat for a club like Barcelona to kind of play around, and it's I'm
It's
at a loss for
mind-boggling.
words.
Yeah,
I'm at a
really
loss
is.
for
It
words.
really
Really,
is.
I really am.
It's so unbelievably fantastic. Like, it's just it's not even fair. It's not fair. Like, I spent were you all on Twitter afterwards just watching everybody like lose their absolute ever-loving minds? Like, it was just incredible,
It's still crazy seeing like Marcelo comment on his like
Wild.
Instagram, like yeah.
And then didn't Andy Robertson comment on Marcello's comment or something like that? Like, it was just like a pile-on of all the best left backs in the world, just giving each other handshakes and
Fonzie's the guy, man.
I know.
The guy. Everyone knows. Everyone's trying to catch on the wave that Fonzie is the next thing, man.
Yeah. It's generational talent. Like, it's getting bandied around like candy out there in the interwebs. It's so good to see it. It really, really is. And then Jay Dave scores a nice little tap in on his preseason debut. That's not bad.
I was gonna say the best part is just seeing how jealous some of these U.S. fans are getting, because they're prodigy, and it's ours. Fonzie stole the show.
They love to mention that Jonathan David's from Brooklyn. Every second they get that opportunity, it's like, oh, Brooklyn boy, Jonathan David.
Yeah. Are we going to talk about Victor Vasquez going back to Belgium?
We could quickly, just to wrap up.
Is that official?
Here,
Yeah, I think it's official, and he's gone to
a picture. Yeah.
I mean, I have an anecdote. Eupen is the one town that I was desperate to visit on my honeymoon in Belgium, but it's right. Well, because it's the German capital of Belgium, and it's right at the furthest eastern part. So my wife and we took a train, and we got off the train, and then we sort of went the wrong way and ended up trapped in a like mini mall, and so we never actually got to see Eupen, because by the time we figured our way out of the mini mall, we were like, forget it, the train's leaving, let's just go back to Brussels. So I'm sure it's a nice place, but I actually didn't get to see it properly. So
that's Jeff's connection to Victor Vasquez right there.
I mean everybody knew who he was. Uber drivers in Antwerp knew who he was because of his playing time with Club Brugge. So
that's a great point. Yeah.
I mentioned TFC, and my cab driver was like, oh, Victor Vasquez plays for you guys, and I was like, no, he used to play for us, but yeah.
I mean, I remember when he was on Footy Talks a little bit earlier, and he said he wanted to come to Toronto and all of this, and all of TFC Live blew up, and it's like, sign Victor Vasquez now, and Ali Curtis had to come on to kind of set the record straight. It's good to see him land somewhere, because he wanted to continue playing, and he was too good to end his career on that sort of kind of down note there. So we'll see we'll keep an eye on Victor Vasquez. We'll see how he does, and I want to see if this sort of translates into his future coaching role, which I think we're all keeping an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, give him all the money. Just wherever he wants to live in the city, we buy the apartment, give him all the
money. we know Greg Vanney is a very, very big advocate for Victor Vasquez. So we'll keep an eye on him for sure. It's great to see him land somewhere, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's a
we got
great way.
We got another poll. We got an ending poll. Yeah. Which club will give TFC more trouble? Didn't we do that already?
There you go. I think we did off the top. So
yeah.
But at any rate, we'll wrap up the show there. I guess a parting shot reminder to Michael that his Manchester United could have had Alphonso Davies for $2 million. But I feel like I had to get that in there, considering we were talking about the teams that Alphonso could have gone to. But of course, a big thanks to Aron Papernick for coming on the show. Be sure to check out Canada FC on Sirius XM
Mm-hmm.
167. You know, as you can see, he's got a good rounded knowledge of Canadian soccer. Jeff and Mike, good stuff. Thanks as always. And make sure to check out Footy Talks, a lot of more upcoming shows. And, of course, visit Waking the Red. We'll have all your game day content today and reaction to tonight's game between Toronto FC and the Vancouver Whitecaps. See you next Tuesday.